We can pass the floor over to Tessa now. I introduced Tessa earlier, but Tessa is here to talk about winning teams with C15 and is a co-owner of Nelo Canada. So over to you, Tessa.
Hey, everyone. So yeah, my title is, Nelo Canada, and I'm going to talk about the one boat that we do not sell or manufacture, but it also is probably my favorite boat, my favorite race. And my goal is for, any coaches watching why C15 is important for clubs and how it can really improve the club culture outside of just those races. And for athletes, why participating in C15 is going to help you long term, even in your other crew boats, your singles as a kayaker, and just how it can maybe improve you racing in your other races, but also looking back on your career once you're finished, how it can really give like a huge sense of meaning and tons of really amazing memories, win or lose. I'll be talking about kind of the winning culture and how that's affected me personally and our club. But truly, I think it's such a unique and cool part of our sport that when tapped into can be really, really powerful. So those are kind of my goals, or my goal of what you can take away. But yeah, I think overall, if I say war canoe, I mean C15. I've had 33 years of having it, we'll call it war canoe, so excuse me. But obviously, there's points to be had at nationals. So coaches, you can have points at nationals, but that's the kind of smallest part. I've looked back and really thought about long-term athlete development for myself. My span of winning medals extended well past my full-time kayaking career. And like the main reason for that was that I kept participating in our war canoes. And once I decided to quit training full-time and not go to trials, etc., I committed myself to being at least in good enough shape to be in our war canoe. And my goal was to win for 10 years in a row, and we did that. And that while I did that, I was also then able to go in some C4s and K4s and get medals in other races too. And I definitely would never have done that if it wasn't for that team C15, like the tradition of practice. At Burl Oak, we have spaghetti nights on Thursdays, which I had to leave tonight to be on this call. So that was a big sacrifice. I think some of them are watching now. So having every Thursday was our C15 crew practice, and then having spaghetti all together. Like there's nothing else that would compare to that at our club for culture and tradition. And that's been going on since the inception of Burl Oak, largely thanks to my mom. So shout out to Connie Lee. So yeah, I just wanted to go through, I don't have a PowerPoint, excuse me. So I'm just gonna go through a little bit of story time, a little bit with Burl Oak Canoe Club. I'm gonna be focusing entirely basically on Burl Oak because it's what I have experience with. And we had a very, very long kind of dominance in senior men's and senior women's war canoe, which I'll go into kind of the nature of that culture and how it came to be. But Burl Oak had a history of senior men's dominance in all disciplines, kayak, canoe, through the 90s, early 2000s. We just consistently had men on the senior worlds team. And that was kind of what we were known for. We started winning senior men's war canoe in 2004. And I was obviously a young girl and didn't necessarily feel part of the culture of excellence because they're so male dominated. It was when we won our juvenile, so U18, our juvenile women's war canoe in 2007. And we set the nationals record during that race. That truly sparked this huge domino effect that created a women's program at our club. And it took maybe, I think, like 6 or 7 years after that, but we ended up having more women's points than men's points at nationals for the first time ever. And I think it was really catalyzed by that 2007 dominating win. What we did in that year was we got a new cox, who some of you may know was my brother, Mark Oldershaw. Him stepping up and wanting to cox was a huge, I think, indicator to our team that, you know, if he's going to do this, obviously he sees maybe something in us. So it brought up the level of professionalism. And then we also got a new stroke, who I need to shout out is Natalie Thompson. And she came from Mississauga, where they had an amazing working program from Kyle being like a very intense cox and coach there. So that was a big help. But I would say overall, it was just the expectation and the fact that we had a C15 practice after our regular practice. It wasn't like, oh God, we have to go work new now. It was, all right, like, let's go. We have our crew, let's go. We're excited. That year in 2007, every person from our club who went to nationals got a medal. And it was just such an amazing year. And it, like I said, it really did spark so much after that. That was my first year getting nationals medals. And then I kept getting nationals medals every year until, I don't know, well, 2018, I guess, was my last year. Yeah. And we won 10 more juvenile women's youth or C15. I think 4 or 5 midget or U16 women's, and the 10 senior women's war canoes that I mentioned too. One thing that I think is interesting, if you look at our senior women's crew versus our senior men's crew. So our senior men's crew won for 14 years, from 2004 to 2017, if the math's right. And they had this amazing lineup. Like, there was, you know, my brother and all these senior national team members that were clearly, like, if you look on paper, like, of course these guys are unbeatable. Like, this crew is crazy. In 2007, our B crew was second in the race. So obviously we had a very stacked men's team. But our women's team, if you wrote us down on paper, you may not know that we were going to be dominant in any race that we were in. And our crew that started versus the crew that finished, there's only a couple people who stayed kind of in the crew. So we really passed on the knowledge from year to year. And that was where there's obviously like really technical stuff that I'm going to get into less about, like how to paddle, how the stroke should feel, what the rhythm is, what the race plan is, like all those nitty gritty details. If anyone wants to know specifics, feel free to reach out to me. But truly it was about expectations and professionalism, and like a team, working as a team and being excited to be that team and to head to nationals as a club and as a group. And it just added so much value to our team and our culture. The idea of, I was reflecting on this a lot over the pandemic when I had 2 new babies and no one else to talk to. But just the idea of, you know, like womanhood and sisterhood. And there's no time that I felt more connected to being a woman and being in a group of women than winning War Canoe. And that's something that is just so powerful and has given me so much more fulfillment than anything I did really in a K1. And I spent obviously tons and tons of my time and effort into trying to be fast in K1 and K4 and K2. But that sense of, like sisterhood and really feeling like powerful with your group and your friends and your teammates, there's nothing like a really successful War Canoe to make you feel that way. The reason for many of our medals, I think, like in C4, obviously it's easy to translate why being good in War Canoe would be good in a tub C4, but I don't think we would have our K4 medals or our K2 medals if it wasn't for that team group atmosphere that was really, really built on our C15. What else was there? Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. The other great reason for really promoting and pushing a C15 program is the athletes who may not be in your A C4 or your top K4 getting medals at nationals and walking away from being on a podium or being in a final or any of that, or just being in a boat with the best paddler from their club. That is something really, really valuable that they can take from our sport that they wouldn't if they're just going out in their K1s and K2s. Even especially now with our mixed work news being involved, like you can now race with the best person at your club, even if that person is the other gender, and just race with people you otherwise don't really get to race with very often. And that, again, it just builds like such a sense of community, and you can really build your club culture with C15, especially if you get everyone on board. Getting everyone on board and getting that buy-in, I think, is led by coaches, obviously, led by the leaders of the group. So your top paddlers, your senior athletes. I always would like to look and see if before practice, if someone heard thunder, like who's disappointed and who's happy to get out of it and who's disappointed they can't go. And really, as coaches, maybe identify those people who are disappointed they can't go because of thunder and get them to have a leadership role within the C15 program. The culture, like I said, at Burl Oak, we had Hunter, who was coxing some of these crews, my brother Mark, my brother Adam coxing these women's and girls, and Hunter would always have these black bandanas, and all his crews had black bandanas, and he would race with these black bandanas, and it was like such a form of, like I said, sisterhood and power, and like such a positive experience for the athletes. And then we'd go into our senior boat, and that was with either Mark or Adam coxing, and we wouldn't all wear those because we're like, that's like for our I'm just like juvenile U18 crews. And we just had this really, really strong association with what our team meant and what we're doing. And having that just led to success and just so much positivity in like under our tent, and just continued on. I've now been not paddling for many years, and it's still given me so much joy to like think back on those times. So that's sort of culture and what it can do for your club, what it can do for your athletes, what it does for me personally. And then second, I wanted to get into a bit more about the specifics and like the technique and what it should feel like. And it's hard to do it outside of the boat itself, but the difference, and any girls from Burl Oak who I've been talking to about K4, it's basically the exact same thing. But the difference between having 14 paddlers paddling in unison and stroke, but doing the right type of stroke and the right rhythm and the right stroke rate, it doesn't matter as much who you have in your boat as if they're doing it well, and if they're doing it in the way that like a war canoe should be paddled. And that's why I think our women's boat, like I said, on paper, we didn't necessarily have 14 superstars, but we knew how to paddle, and we all were bought into that rhythm, that race plan. The biggest thing is rhythm and having a pause even at a super high stroke rate, getting air time to let the boat like glide through the water and maintain your speed while you're not working is crucial, and also just keeping everyone together. So when we would first get out for our first couple of practices, especially if we had a lot of new people in the boat, or there was people who weren't, or who were away and on a team or something, so we didn't have our really core group that knew what we were doing, it would feel sluggish and very, very hard to paddle and not nearly as fun. And then once we would get that rhythm and get that feeling, like it just felt 100 times better. Not even just like we're going faster, just it physically felt more enjoyable to do. And like you could really push yourself harder without just feeling awkward and like you're paddling on a dock. Our senior men's crew, especially in 1,000, would have a low stroke rate. They were incredibly strong too, but they would have a slow stroke rate and a relatively long pause. And it would just be everyone together hitting the catch hard. And then in war canoe, sorry, C15, that's different than any other boat that I wouldn't say is translatable to K4 or any kayak or any boat really, is the snap forward and the splash. So we would, in our cruise, we would wait for, or we'd get into our rhythm and we would wait to hear the sound of the like, when your blades are hitting the exit little drips of water from the person in front of you. And it'd be that snap that you could literally hear the sound of it if it was going right. So if you're paddling and it's just sort of splash and like some kerplunks and all that, that's not going to be a fast boat. And it doesn't matter if you have 14, Olympic champions in the boat, it won't matter. And the biggest thing, of course, is your stroke, your front four, maintaining and setting that type of rhythm. But really it's a full boat effort, which is what I've said in K4 too. It's not just your stroke who's doing the stroke rate and the rhythm, but your front four, like that's their job, setting that rhythm and maintaining their proper stroke rates for your race plan. And engine room, middle six, which I was in for all of our races, pushing that power and really, really using all your strength to pull and like hit that catch so that your front four can feel it and keep that rhythm and keep that rate. And then the back four, squeezing into the small little spot and trying not to get hit by the cops or something, keeping in stroke and keeping the energy up, the finish, not getting out of stroke, not running out of energy, and really keeping the boat kind of together. The back four is just as important as the engine room and the front four. So every single position is important and part of keeping that winning crew. And that's why it takes every single person to be bought in and really into it and excited to be there, or else you're just not going to get that like perfect rhythm and that energetic snap. There's nothing like just being at nationals, and I'd be the most nervous for war canoe. And even I think I can speak for a lot of our senior men or any of my teammates, that we'd be the most nervous for our C15 races. I think I would be sometimes the most nervous for other people's C15 races, just because there's so much like energy and just so much kind of like primal just angst over getting into this boat and making it work. And I know that I would feel so nervous, and then we'd get into the crew and I'd often have, very close friends beside me, Alana, Marianne, for those of you guys who know those people, they're always next to me or in front of me, and feeling them there, like that would give me so much comfort. And as soon as we would start, like we'd do our ups and I'd hear that like hard catch, feel like a surge of strength from the boat going forward, and hear that snap, I would know, like, okay, we know what we're doing. Like, we got this. Let's do it. And there's no harder race, and there's nothing more physically, I don't know what the word is, disastrous than a work canoe race. But ultimately, those things are what is the most rewarding. I'd say, other than, childbirth, it's definitely the most painful thing I'd experienced. And that's why it's also just so unique outside of other races. And trust me, I've completely wiped myself out in a K4, but there's just something about war canoe that's just that, like, I don't know, I like it. It's a different motion. Well, I'm a kayaker, so it's a very different motion than what I'm used to training, but even as a canoeer, it's just different. And it's just so much strength related. But it's also, I think you just dig into like the deepest gear that you possibly have, because you have 13 other people, 14 including your cocks, who are just like all giving it as much as they can. And yeah, just being a part of that is just something so special and so unique to C15, to our sport. There's so much history too, with our senior or our juvenile war canoe. Actually, I don't know when the trophy was created, but it's a big wooden plaque with like carvings. And I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying this, but we at Burloak, our like thing is we always put nachos on it, and the girls who won it tell everyone like that's nacho trophy because they didn't win it. And there's just like all these little, fun things that we have with our trophies. And with our senior women's trophy, it's a beautiful old silver cup, and we drink water out of it for sure every year. But passing that around and just having that and seeing the history is just so unique. And that's why there's nothing else that really compares to it. Even outside of our sport, I don't know that many specifically women's sports that have something so historical, and with so much like legacy that we get to participate in. That's something I consistently bring it back to kind of, womanhood and sisterhood, and how it makes you feel as a woman to win this race. It's something we don't often get to participate in. An example is the black. Like, the black is the most revered trophy that CKC gives out, and we are not winning that. That's a men's race. What other trophies, if you think of famous trophies in Canada, like the Stanley Cup, like, we're not winning that. And I think it's really cool that we do have some pretty historic and interesting trophies available for us to win in C15, which I look forward to more and more history being built within women's sport. And I think we're getting there, and women's canoeing and kayaking too. But that's something that is really cool to feel connected to that history. And the idea that there's so much legacy and sisterhood behind it is very, very special, and something I think that men and boys do get to participate in a little bit more in our society, as far as like a brotherhood or this team. And that's why when I was thinking of the title of this webinar of women in sport and how C15 made me feel specifically, I think there's just so many layers and so much depth there, to really, really make it something that we need to invest with our time, and keep it really, really strong in our sport. And especially because this is an Ontario call, Ontario women's war canoe has like completely dominated for the last probably 15 years. And that's something I'm super proud of and just want to see continue. And I think that's everything for me. I think I have done all my notes of just kind of the specifics of how to make a great work canoe, which again, I can totally get into that if anyone has questions for their crews, like more specific. And then just, yeah, what it means and why it's important and why I think we need to keep being inspired to promote it and keep it at our clubs as like a big aspect of our culture. But any questions are welcome.
Yes, if anyone has any questions in the chat or come off mute, I'm so excited for C15 now. You did a great job at painting the picture of the energy you get from those type of races and practices.
Yeah, I did leave out a little bit of how excruciatingly painful and awful it is, but it's also the best. So
yeah.
I have a question, if that's okay.
Yep.
Like you, I come from the old school where you train work canoe, then we train small boats. Nowadays, when we fill a work canoe, let's say with a high performance or our senior boat or junior boat, they have killer workouts, small boats. Then they, like you guys, would get out and they go into work canoe, and they love it too. It's not a negative thing, but I just wonder how much work did you guys do in the work canoe? Because before we did a lot of work, and now they can't do it because we'd kill them. So I just wondering how much work would you guys do in a work canoe after they come off of a hard practice?
Yeah, our work canoe practices were not training sessions. I would say they're practices. We definitely, would do pieces where we'd get up to race pace. Often throughout the summer, we'd build up from probably like doing probably a kilometer, 1,500 meters of, more light paddling, long pause, like really exaggerated, just sort of to get that feeling and hear that rhythm. We then would do ups and up to race pace, but probably no more than really 150 meters at a time. And then getting closer to nationals, we would dial right into our starts. Starts are a whole other kind of part I didn't cover, which I can quickly get into, but that would be nailing the exact timing, getting together as a crew, practicing really precisely what is it going to feel like when we're on the line and getting off the line and transitioning into our race pace. That we would practice over and over, which is tiring, but not in a training for fitness way, just in a practicing to make it the best that it can be. And so everyone knows what to feel when we get onto the race course. And knows what that expectation would, or like what we expect in that race. There was one, there's maybe a couple here and there where we may have done a 250 or two, but definitely not doing like really workouts in work canoe specifically. You're drained and you have the fitness from your smaller boats, and really it's just practicing getting that exact race and what you need kind of nailed down. And a start in work canoe, which I didn't mention, but a start in work canoe is I think such an important part of the race, just mentally, even to try and get ahead of competitors. And just you never, like if you're behind and getting washed, I think we can all, if you've ever been in the back of a work canoe race, there's no coming back, or very little coming back after hitting that. So getting out in front and then getting into your race pace, which is where that kind of pause and rhythm, I think, really, really matters. And that's how we could be pretty dominant sometimes, is getting into that race pace, because we practice that exact speed and everyone knew exactly what we're looking for. We could just maintain speed at a slightly lower output and ultimately win. Sorry, I went off a bit topic, but I would say not a ton of fitness work in practice.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Ryan has a question. You can go ahead, Ryan.
Hi, Tessa. Thank you so much. I appreciate you're missing the Thursday night spaghetti night and with your two kids. I'm trying to do bath time right now with Rowan. So I love listening to this. I never was the biggest fan myself because I think it hurt too much of C15. Brett was my coach, he knows. But I'm even inspired to try it for first 5 minutes, and then I'll remember how hard it is. So I am a big fan, but it was super hard. But I do remember the times with your crews, right? And those are memories from paddling that I pull out of it. What I think I hear from you a lot is creating that culture, that club culture that comes with a group, right? Where you can have the best Olympians in a boat with people that aren't Olympians, but they're one team. So I love hearing how you did that with your spaghetti nights. And I think even more so for me was, how do you pick your leaders, right? They're not necessarily those Olympians. It's the people that are really excited to get on the water or disappointed when they couldn't. So I think that was a great insight from a coach's eye perspective of where we're looking at leaders and what is their role as a leader versus just being really good at in a boat. It doesn't matter if it's C15 or dragging boat or C4 K4. So thank you. I thought those were amazing insights.
Thank you. And as far as leaders too, like at our club, kind of to translate it more for the men's, but our fastest paddlers in our senior men's boat were very, very rarely there for almost any practices because so many of them were on the national team. They'd be at senior worlds, and they wouldn't be leading the group to get on the water. So yeah, I definitely think your leaders don't need to be your fastest. And at Burloak, we have an awards ceremony every year around Christmas time, and we have a MVP war canoe trophy, and that award doesn't go to like the fastest paddler or even the best war canoe paddler technically, but definitely just someone who shows up, who makes a difference in the crew. And that, yeah, for coaches to identify that and really reward that and acknowledge it in some way, I think is pretty cool.
I remember hearing stories of Van Kay like missing the start of practice and jumping off the dock to try and get into the boat when he came home for like 3 days in between his crazy schedule. So, to create that environment is amazing.
Well, and even like Mark, my brother, he'd be away all the time for competitions, and he said, okay, I want to cox, and he wanted to cox our senior women's crew, and he did. And like I said, his influence on that first juvenile girls crew set off a huge effect in our club. And not to give him the credit, because there's a lot of work from us too, but that idea of the best people still being really, really into it is awesome. And it's also something that's sort of fun to think about, like with Adam Vank. I remember after they won, I think it was in Regina, probably 2010, they won senior men's, and like the next day he was just hurting so much from that race after the race, because he hadn't paddled it all summer because he'd been away. And if you don't paddle work canoe and then you jump into a race, like, it hurts a lot. And that's actually, sorry to go on a bit of a tangent, in I guess it must have been 2014, I'm taking a guess, but it was in Regina, and we won senior women's war canoe. Haley, I don't know if you were in the beach crew that was second, but we had our start. We were winning, and I'm in my head, I'm not the most fit at this point anymore because I'm not training full time. So sometimes in those races when I wasn't really the full-time trainer, I'm like, I know my job isn't to try super, super hard this whole time. It's the really young, fit girls that can do that. And I'll be, making sure we're having a great stroke rate and all that. Still trying, but we got off the line and I'm feeling our rhythm. I'm like, okay, we got this. Like, let's keep our rhythm. Let's keep this, you know, super powerful snap and like, we got this, I'll finish hard, let's do it. And then started feeling like, oh, like, okay, where's that rhythm? That's weird. I'm like losing the rhythm. All right, like, where's our rhythm? And I could feel the boat kind of falling apart a little bit and thinking like, okay, what are we going to do? Like trying to get it back and it's kind of falling apart. And then just like in the corner of my eye, seeing Balmy Beach come up and just being like, no, and just pulling so hard, but we got a little bit back, but we never got back to that like super polished, like finesse, amazing rhythm and stroke. And I can tell you that hurt and exhausted me so much more than any race. Like I was like, we got off the water. I was like, do I have to go to the doctor? Like, I don't know what just happened to my body. And it was because obviously we had someone beside us, which is hard, but it was because of the lack of the like rhythm. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't polished. So then it just feels like you're dock paddling and no one likes that. It's not fun. So again, I think even just take away like whether you win or whether you lose or whatever, it just feels way more fun to paddle well and paddle together. And that again is what makes you fast more than any other variable. Any other questions from anybody? I think we're here. Okay, I think we're good. So there's a couple secrets I didn't give away just because I know there's going to be some Burloak war canoes still racing for many years, and we got to keep that on lock. But if you do ever have a crew and you want to really, you know, get it going, and you have a club with maybe less of a war canoe culture or like legacy or experience just within your club, truly reach out to me and I'll always go get on a phone call, or if you're local enough, even like we can do a practice and I can give tips or just input on the rhythm, the stroke. I love war canoe and don't get to actually do anything with it with my job like I do for kayaking and everything. So yeah, you can absolutely use me as a resource. Even if you're not from Burloak, I really want to see C15 be part of our culture going forward and dominant in Ontario. So yeah, please reach out and that's an open invitation.
Awesome. Thank you, Tessa. All right. I think we're good here. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Thank you, Nancy and Tessa, for all the insights you guys shared tonight. We will have this recording posted on our YouTube if you want to go back and review anything. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.